Have you ever felt like you're finally breaking free from patterns that have held you back for years? Like invisible chains are suddenly falling away, and you can breathe deeper than you have in ages. What you might be experiencing is the clearing of your karmic debt, and according to Carl Jung's revolutionary understanding of the psyche, there are specific signs that reveal when this profound transformation is taking place. Today, we're diving deep into 4 unmistakable signs that your karmic debt has been cleared, using the wisdom of Jungian psychology to understand what's really happening in your inner world. If you've been feeling like something fundamental has shifted in your life, this video might just explain why. But before we begin, if you're interested in exploring the deeper mysteries of the feminine psyche and personal transformation, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're building a community of women ready to embrace their psychological wholeness and step into their authentic power. Carl Jung believed that we carry forward unresolved psychological material from our past, what he called the unlived life of our ancestors and our own suppressed experiences. This creates what many spiritual traditions call karmic debt, the energetic and psychological patterns we must work through to achieve individuation, Jung's term for becoming whole. For women especially, this karmic debt often manifests as inherited patterns of self-sacrifice, suppressed creativity, or disconnection from our intuitive wisdom. Jung recognized that the feminine psyche carries unique burdens in a world that has historically undervalued feminine ways of knowing and being. Take Sarah, for example, a 35-year-old marketing executive who had spent years trying to prove herself in a male-dominated industry. She constantly felt like she was fighting invisible battles, carrying the weight of generations of women who couldn't speak their truth. Her karmic debt included ancestral patterns of silencing her voice and diminishing her worth. When karmic debt begins to clear, Jung observed that individuals experience what he called enantiodromia, a flowing over into the opposite. The very patterns that once dominated our lives begin to transform into their healthier expressions. The woman who was once voiceless finds her authentic voice. The one who was always giving discovers healthy boundaries. This clearing doesn't happen overnight. It's a process that often begins when we start doing our shadow work, integrating the rejected parts of ourselves and healing the wounds that have been passed down through generations. Jung understood that true healing requires us to face what he called the collective unconscious, the shared psychological material of humanity that influences our individual experiences. The signs we're about to explore aren't just random symptoms or coincidences. They're meaningful synchronicities that indicate a fundamental shift in your psychological structure. Jung would say these signs point to the activation of what he called the transcendent function, the bridge between conscious and unconscious that allows for genuine transformation. The first and perhaps most dramatic sign that your karmic debt has been cleared is the sudden end of repetitive relationship patterns that have plagued your life for years or even decades. Jung called these patterns complexes, autonomous clusters of psychological energy that operate like separate personalities within our psyche, often driving us to recreate familiar but painful dynamics. For women, these karmic relationship patterns frequently involve what Jung identified as the negative mother complex or the wounded father complex. You might find yourself repeatedly attracting partners who are emotionally unavailable, just like your father was. Or perhaps you keep ending up in friendships where you're always the one giving, never receiving, mirroring a childhood where you had to be the caretaker. Maria's story illustrates this perfectly. For 20 years, she dated men who were brilliant, but emotionally distant. She would pour herself into these relationships, trying to heal them, trying to be enough to make them stay. Each relationship ended the same way, with her feeling depleted and abandoned. This was her karmic debt, carrying forward her grandmother's pattern of loving men who couldn't love back, inherited through the family line like an invisible curse. Jung understood that these patterns persist Because they serve an unconscious purpose. They keep us connected to our ancestral story, even when that story causes pain. The complex becomes a way of staying loyal to our lineage, of carrying forward unfinished emotional business from previous generations. But when karmic debt clears, something remarkable happens. The complex loses its power over us. Maria described it as suddenly seeing the pattern from outside herself, as if she was watching a movie of her life. She could see the invisible threads that had been pulling her toward the same type of man over and over again. This shift often happens quite suddenly. You might find yourself naturally disinterested in people who would have fascinated you before. Where you once felt irresistibly drawn to the unavailable person across the room, you now feel neutral, even slightly repelled. Your psyche has literally rewired itself. Jung called this the integration of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've rejected or denied. When we stop projecting our unlived life onto others, when we stop trying to heal our wounds through relationships, the compulsive patterns simply dissolve. You begin attracting people who reflect your new level of consciousness, rather than your old wounds. The clearing of relationship karma often brings with it a period of solitude. This isn't loneliness in the traditional sense, but what Jung called creative solitude, a rich, fertile time where you're getting to know the person you're becoming, without the distraction of trying to complete yourself through others. Women often report feeling initially scared by this shift. After years of being drawn to intensity and drama, healthy relationships can feel boring at first. But this is actually your psyche recalibrating to what Jung called the transcendent function. The ability to hold tension between opposites and find a new way forward that honors both your individual needs and your capacity for genuine intimacy. The second sign that your karmic debt has been cleared appears in the realm Jung considered most sacred, your dreams. Jung believed that dreams were direct communications from the unconscious, and when karmic patterns begin to resolve, the quality and content of your dreams undergo a profound transformation. Before karmic clearing, dreams often carry the weight of unresolved trauma and inherited pain. You might have recurring nightmares, dreams where you're being chased, trapped, or unable to speak. These dreams reflect the psychological material you're carrying, both your own and that of your ancestral line. Jung saw these as the psyche's attempt to process overwhelming emotional content that the conscious mind wasn't yet ready to handle. Consider Rebecca, a 42-year-old therapist who had spent years having the same terrifying dream. She was always trying to save her younger sister from drowning, but no matter how hard she swam, she could never reach her. This dream reflected her karmic burden of feeling responsible for everyone's emotional well-being, a pattern inherited from her mother and grandmother, who had both been the emotional caretakers of their families. When karmic debt begins to clear, your dreams shift from chaotic and frightening to peaceful and deeply symbolic. Instead of being pursued by shadowy figures, you might dream of walking through beautiful gardens or having meaningful conversations with wise women. Jung called these big dreams, dreams that carry profound symbolic meaning and often feature archetypal imagery. The symbolism in these post-clearing dreams often relates to what Jung called the feminine archetype, images of the Great Mother, the wise woman, or the divine feminine. You might dream of goddesses, powerful female animals like lionesses or eagles, or natural imagery like flowering trees or flowing rivers. These symbols represent the awakening of your authentic feminine power, no longer filtered through trauma or cultural conditioning. Rebecca's dreams completely transformed after her karmic clearing. Instead of the drowning dreams, she began having beautiful dreams where she was teaching groups of women ancient wisdom in sacred temples. She was no longer trying to save anyone. Instead, she was sharing her gifts from a place of overflow rather than depletion. Another common dream theme after karmic clearing involves receiving gifts or treasures. You might dream of finding precious stones, inheriting a beautiful home, or being given keys to secret gardens. Jung interpreted these as symbols of the psyche returning to its natural state of abundance and creativity. The peaceful quality of these dreams is particularly significant. Jung believed that when the psyche is no longer fighting against itself, when the shadow has been integrated and the unlived life has been reclaimed, dreams become collaborative rather than conflictual. Your unconscious is no longer trying to shock you into awareness. Instead, it's supporting your continued growth and expansion. Many women also report prophetic or visionary dreams during this phase. Jung would explain this as the activation of what he called the prospective function of the unconscious, the ability to perceive potential futures. When you're no longer bound by karmic patterns, your psyche can access its natural intuitive wisdom and guide you toward your highest potential. The third sign of cleared karmic debt is perhaps the most liberating: the sudden release from ancestral patterns that have unconsciously governed your choices for generations. Jung understood that we inherit far more than just physical traits from our family lines. We also inherit what he called psychological DNA, the unresolved conflicts, suppressed emotions, and unlived dreams of our ancestors. For women, these ancestral patterns often revolve around themes of powerlessness, self-sacrifice, and the suppression of creative and sexual energy. You might carry your great-grandmother's fear of speaking up, your grandmother's belief that women must always put others first, or your mother's conviction that expressing anger is dangerous and unfeminine. Jung called this phenomenon participation mystique, an unconscious identification with ancestral figures that keeps us living their unlived lives rather than our own. It's as if we're sleepwalking through someone else's story, making choices that made sense for them, but don't serve our individual path. Take Elena, a talented artist who had spent 15 years in a corporate job she hated. Every time she considered pursuing art full-time, she would hear her grandmother's voice saying, "Art is a nice hobby, but it won't put food on the table." Elena carried 3 generations of women who had sacrificed their creative dreams for economic security. Her karmic debt was living out their unlived artist selves while denying her own. When karmic debt clears, you experience what Jung called differentiation from the participation mystique. Suddenly, you can distinguish between your authentic desires and the inherited shoulds and musts that have been running your life. Elena described it as finally being able to hear her own voice separate from the chorus of ancestral voices that had been drowning it out. This differentiation often comes with profound grief. As you separate from these ancestral patterns, you might feel like you're betraying your family line or abandoning the women who came before you. Jung understood this grief as necessary. It's the mourning of the unlived lives you've been carrying and the recognition that you cannot heal the past by repeating it. The clearing of ancestral patterns frequently manifests as a sudden inability to tolerate situations that you once endured without question. Maybe you've always accepted disrespect in the workplace because that's just how it is, carrying forward your grandmother's belief that women should be grateful for any opportunity. When karmic debt clears, your tolerance for these situations evaporates overnight. Jung believed that by breaking free from ancestral patterns, we actually honor our lineage more deeply than by repeating them. When Elena finally quit her corporate job to become a full-time artist, she wasn't betraying her grandmother. She was completing her grandmother's unlived creative dreams in a new generation where it was finally possible. This sign often comes with increased psychic sensitivity. You might suddenly understand family dynamics that were confusing before, or feel the emotional states of your female relatives more clearly. Jung explained this as the activation of what he called the transcendent function. When you're no longer identified with ancestral patterns, you can perceive them objectively and even help heal them for future generations. Women often report feeling simultaneously more connected to and more separate from their family during this phase. You love them more purely because you're no longer carrying their unfinished emotional business. You can see their struggles with compassion, rather than unconsciously living them out yourself. The fourth and final sign that your karmic debt has been cleared is the emergence of what Jung called authentic personality, a natural confidence and self-trust that doesn't depend on external validation or achievement. This isn't the false confidence that comes from proving yourself to others, but rather the quiet certainty that emerges when you're finally living from your true center. Jung distinguished between the ego, our conscious identity that's often built on reactions to trauma and cultural conditioning, and the self with a capital S, our authentic core that exists beyond the wounds and adaptations. When karmic debt clears, the ego stops driving the bus and the self takes the wheel. Before this clearing, you might have felt like you were constantly performing, trying to be good enough, smart enough, successful enough to finally feel worthy of love and respect. This performance anxiety is often inherited from generations of women who had to earn their right to exist in a world that didn't naturally value feminine wisdom and power. Consider Sophia, a successful lawyer who had built her entire identity around being perfect. She worked 80-hour weeks, never made mistakes, and was always available for everyone else's needs. But inside, she felt empty and exhausted. Her karmic debt was carrying forward her mother's and grandmother's belief that women had to be twice as good to deserve half as much. When karmic debt clears, this performance anxiety simply evaporates. Sophia described waking up one morning and feeling fundamentally different about herself. She still cared about doing good work, but the desperate need to prove herself was gone. She could make mistakes without her world falling apart. She could say no without guilt consuming her. Jung called this state individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, rather than who you think you should be. When you're individuated, you trust your own perceptions, honor your own needs, and follow your own inner compass rather than looking to others for direction. This natural confidence shows up in small but significant ways. You stop over-explaining your decisions. You trust your intuition, even when it doesn't make logical sense. You set boundaries without lengthy justifications. You pursue what interests you without needing permission from others. The self-trust that emerges is particularly powerful for women because it represents the integration of what Jung called the animus, the inner masculine energy that gives us the strength to act on our authentic desires. When karmic debt is cleared, the animus is no longer wounded or defensive, but becomes a supportive force that helps you manifest your feminine wisdom in the world. Women often report that others notice this shift before they do. Friends and colleagues comment that something is different, that you seem more grounded, more present, more yourself. This is because you're no longer broadcasting the energetic frequency of unresolved trauma. Your energy field has cleared, and people can feel your authentic presence. Before we explore what this all means for your journey forward, I want to ask you to do something important for our community. If this video is resonating with you, if you're recognizing these signs in your own life, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with another woman who might need to hear this message. We're creating a ripple effect of healing that extends far beyond individual transformation. Now that we've explored all 4 signs of cleared karmic debt, you might be wondering what comes next. Jung understood that clearing karmic patterns isn't the end of the journey. It's actually the beginning of what he called the second half of life, where we move from healing our wounds to expressing our gifts. Now that we've explored all 4 signs of cleared karmic debt, you might be wondering what comes next. Jung understood that clearing karmic patterns isn't the end of the journey. It's actually the beginning of what he called the second half of life, where we move from healing our wounds to expressing our gifts. When your karmic debt has been cleared, you enter what Jung called the creative phase of individuation. This is where you begin to live from your authentic self rather than from your adaptive ego. You're no longer spending your energy maintaining old patterns or fighting against inherited limitations. Instead, you can direct your life force toward your true purpose and creative expression. This phase often brings what Jung called meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. Opportunities that align with your authentic path begin appearing with surprising frequency. People who can support your growth show up at exactly the right moment. Resources become available just when you need them. This isn't magic. It's the natural result of living in alignment with your true nature rather than against it. Many women describe feeling like they're finally living in color after years of black and white existence. The world seems more vivid, relationships feel more genuine, and creative ideas flow more freely. This is because you're no longer filtering life through the lens of old wounds and inherited fears. Jung emphasized that the clearing of karmic debt also brings responsibility. When you're free from old patterns, you become what he called a carrier of consciousness for your family line and community. Your healing creates space for others to heal. Your authenticity gives others permission to be authentic. Your courage to break cycles inspires others to examine their own patterns. If you're recognizing these signs in your own life, Jung would encourage you to honor this transition consciously. Create rituals that acknowledge the completion of old cycles. Write letters to your ancestors, thanking them for their struggles while releasing yourself from carrying their unfinished business. Spend time in nature, which Jung saw as the ultimate expression of the self's natural wisdom. Remember that clearing karmic debt isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process of choosing consciousness over unconsciousness, authenticity over adaptation, and love over fear. Each time you make a choice from your true self, rather than from inherited patterns, you strengthen your individuation and create more freedom for yourself and future generations. Jung believed that women who complete this journey become what he called wise women, carriers of feminine wisdom who can guide others home to themselves. You become a living example that transformation is possible, that old patterns can be broken, and that each generation can heal what the previous ones couldn't. The journey of clearing karmic debt requires tremendous courage, especially for women who have been taught that their worth depends on caring for others before themselves. But as Jung reminded us, the ultimate gift we can give to the world is our own wholeness. When we heal ourselves, we heal the world. Your karmic debt clearing isn't just about your personal freedom. It's about contributing to the collective healing of the feminine principle in our world. Each woman who breaks free from inherited limitations makes it easier for the next woman to do the same. If these signs resonate with your experience, trust what you're feeling. Your psyche knows when transformation is real, and remember, this clearing is your birthright. You were always meant to be free, whole, and authentically yourself. The debt has been paid, the patterns have been broken, and your true life is waiting to be lived.